Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, from London, from Chatham House. My name is Orisa Lutsevich, and I'm the head of Ukraine Forum. I'm really pleased to welcome today Andriy Yermak, who is the head of the Office of the President in Ukraine. We will be discussing the war on Ukraine and what is the latest update on the ground, what are the strategic objectives of Russia, what are the aims of Ukraine in defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and how a collective West and global coalition actually can help end this war, bring peace to Ukraine, and most importantly, security to the center of Europe. Andriy Yermak is not a newcomer to Chatham House. We just hosted him twice already, and the last time we met with Andriy in London, and we were inside Chatham House under, of course, different circumstances. But it was in October 2020 when he was part of the delegation with President Zelensky signing a very important strategic agreement with the United Kingdom and speaking about what that partnership actually means. And today, really, this partnership is tested by war in Ukraine, because in war, we really understand who are the friends and who are real allies and who are sitting on the fence and who perhaps are even supporting the aggressor. Andriy is serving now with President Zelensky first as his advisor, then as head of his office. He's been involved in negotiating with Russians on implementation of Minsk agreements and really trying to bring that peace to Ukraine. He's a lawyer by training. And we are on the record today, so the recording of this event will be also shared widely. Andriy will start his introductory remarks and his speech. He will speak in Ukrainian. So for those of you who need interpretation, please switch on the little globe, choose Ukrainian language, and I'm sure it will be very informative and a very important messages that Andriy has to share with us today. So Andriy, я передаю вам слово. Andriy will speak and then we'll come back to take your questions. Andriy, вам слово.
Hello, Orisa. Hello, everybody. And for me, it's a big honor to be with you today. And in this very critical and tragic moment of my country, of my nation, but it's very important that I have this opportunity to make and to give and to give this message, this information to you. And then, yeah, I continue in Ukrainian.
For any speaker, you will know the opening paragraph is the most challenging one. Under different circumstances, I would probably work thoroughly on the wording thereof to make it sound engaging and relevant at the same time, but not today. I'll start with basic things, therefore. We've been told for years that Ukraine was not implementing reforms properly. We do something in a wrong way. Yet, let us look at the results. For almost a month now, our modernized armed forces have been holding back the onslaught of one of the world's most powerful armies. Logistics chains have been operational. The courts have been working. Trains have been running and carrying millions of people to safety. Utility companies have been doing their job, even under shelling and bombing. The test of war is perhaps the most severe one. We are successfully reforming our country even now, and our sustainability, our resilience has proven to be the fact of life. Resilience, however, is not an absolute category. It isn't about availability, it's about the scale and scope. How much of it has been left? That depends on many factors, on our resolve, which is unwavering. We stand firm on our own land. We defend our values, our way of life, our freedom. You can be sure we've got enough of that. We have been proving that for the entire month. And it also depends on external support. And that's where the uncertainty creeps in. Now we enjoy a strong, unprecedented support. The West has finally become united, as evidenced by sanctions against Russia and assistance to Ukraine, humanitarian, economic, political, military, and technological. Is that enough, is the question. And for how long will the Western determination last? For how long will the states that have always sought to maintain ties with Russia at all costs, even in the face of its invasion of Ukraine, be prepared to bear the brunt of severing such ties? With more than 115 children being killed so far in this war. Given the experience of the previous 8 years, we cannot be too optimistic in this regard. Today, the risks to the global security are so high that the above-mentioned states cannot afford to do business as usual. The next factor is that of Russia itself. How much safety buffer has it got? What are its aims in this war? The West keeps talking about turning up the price that Russia should pay for the aggression. But do we know the point beyond which the Russian leadership will say that's too expensive? One should understand that the narrative of victory at all costs is not just a propaganda cliche. Moscow has repeatedly instrumentalized it, frustrating expectations of those it considered enemies. By setting no limit to the number of victims, by violating the international law, by resorting to blackmail, including threats of man-made disasters and unconventional weapons. In everything, this must be understood. And may I remind you here about the risks that emerged a couple of weeks ago when we were practically on the brink of another Chernobyl disaster, which could have been way too disastrous and way too hazardous. At the same time, one should understand that small victorious wars that do not achieve their goal always increase the risk of social unrest and coup d'etat for Russia itself. Successful wars, on the contrary, stabilize and preserve the regime, whet its appetite for further conquest. You might ask me, what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that Ukraine should emerge victorious from the war that Russia has waged against us. We must work towards this end, all of us. What is happening in Ukraine now concerns everyone. Everyone amongst you, every government, everyone in the world. The war in Ukraine is not just another local conflict. It is a world war that is, for the time being, limited to one country, our country. But I would emphasize for the time being. I would like to reiterate that Russia's encroachments go far beyond Ukraine. It claims to restore the Soviet sphere of influence in both Europe and Asia. It claims to destroy the entire system of international relations and discredit all security institutions. Therefore, Kazakhstan, Poland, the Baltic states, Slovakia, Moldova, Georgia may be next. Yes, Moldova and Georgia against. Georgia, which after the 2008 war under Saakashvili seems afraid of Moscow. Well, perhaps this is Tbilisi's non-trivial way of pursuing European integration. The Russian military are branding their equipment with "to Berlin" slogans yet again. Do you know what that means? We do. The Israelis do. You cannot trust the one who promises to kill you. They can kill you. In the case of Ukraine, Russia's goal is well known. They want to exterminate us. They want to rob us of our agency as a state, terminate our nation building, according to their playbook about one nation, which we've been hearing for 2 decades now. Therefore, one may say that this war has no fathomable reason behind it. This is a war of choice, not of need. But this is probably the first ever war of history theory. Therefore, we must assume that the current Russian leadership will not abandon this goal. And it is ready to pay, however high price it might take. The question of whether the entourage of Putin is willing to pay this price does not matter anymore. So let's focus on this, on Russia's intention to destroy Ukraine. So far, it has not been achieved in one fell swoop. None of the invading forces' strategic tasks have been fulfilled. Therefore, the aggressor is trying to provoke a humanitarian disaster, destroy critical civilian infrastructure and industrial capacity of our country. We must remember that the war is going on in our territory, that our people are dying, that our cities are being razed to the ground. Our armed forces and civilians are holding on with superhuman courage. But we cannot win this war without offensive weapons, without medium-range missiles that can be a means of deterrence. I repeat, in our case, it is about deterrence, not aggression, that would threaten Russian territory with any comparable destruction. Without a full-scale land-lease, we can only defend ourselves, but it's impossible to defend yourselves effectively for a long time without a reliable air defense system capable of downing enemy's cruise and ballistic missiles at a long range, and planes as well. However, we are not given this assistance. We are not given fighter jets. And just like they don't want to see us in NATO, they don't want to see us in NATO. This fear of escalation is understandable, but this fear will not save you. Winston Churchill is known to have explained it all well. The government had to choose between war and shame. They chose shame. They will get war too. Once I was a producer of a movie called Anticipation, and it was shot by a very talented Ukrainian director, Vyacheslav Kristofovich. And the protagonist there said in one of the episodes, everything should occur timely. And I feel that everything should take place timely. Now is the time. On the 24th of March in Brussels, another session of the NATO allies is to take place. And there is still room for maneuver. There is still room for the allies to make a step towards Ukraine, or to say fairly and publicly that those steps would not be taken, that Ukraine will never be part of NATO, as many would be happy to announce today. So be frank, be open. That will allow us to build a new security system. The Russian leadership only understands the language of force, and they confuse peace-loving nations with weak nations. So my question is, are we peace-loving or are we weak? Will you give us the weapons that would allow us to remain independent sovereign state within its internationally recognized borders? Will you open this full-scale land-lease tours, or will you be concerned while observing how our cities are being wiped out? It's almost impossible to watch how Kharkiv, Mariupol, Chernihiv, our beautiful cities and towns, Kyiv, are being annihilated. So please enforce the no-fly zone or give us reliable air defense systems, because your fear feeds the aggression and your indecisiveness prevents us from protecting ourselves. Your position should be articulated very clearly. We will be downing the fighter jets that are bombing civilians. We will be providing air defense support. That's exactly what we need now. We needed it yesterday. Otherwise, Ukraine will bleed to death. It will be depopulated. Of course, we will not surrender. Everyone understands that. But I would like to reiterate yet again, resilience is not about the availability, it's about the scale and scope and reserves. After the Russian occupation of Crimea and invasion of Donbass, some foreign experts started to speak about Finlandization of Ukraine, meant the neutral status of Ukraine and special relations with Russia. But nobody has mentioned that Finlandization is about preserving of a state, its agency and freedom of the people, at the cost of losing territories ensuing from aggression. But we would not give up either our sovereignty or territorial integrity. And while we, with inhuman effort and victims, return our territories to our sovereignty, it will be our victory, but it won't be the defeat of Russia, because they will continue to threaten us and to beat us. And every such strike, air strike or missile strike, will be a strike against European defense institutions and security institutions, and it will be a blow or a strike against the global food security. So it is a key sign of the crisis of the world order when genocide is not punished in serious. So is that what the UN was established for? Is it what brings Europe together? If it is, then Ukraine will not be happy with any of the existing security systems. We need a new, fair system of international security, and we've paid the utmost price for that with our pain, with our sweat, with our blood, with the lives of our people. And it enables us to demand peoples of the world act right now. Finlandization of Ukraine or playing into the hands of any Russian terms and conditions would not enhance international security. It will just guarantee that challenges and threats to security perpetuate. So I will ask you, European states, where will your refugees run? Ukraine is the shield of Europe, but it stands alone in protecting Europe. And it is principally important for us to obtain reliable security guarantees, multilateral binding guarantees. But can the West offer anything more reliable than NATO membership? We don't know of anything like this. The world does demand reliable guarantees that Russia would not be able to implement its ambitions at the international arena. And we request such guarantees from our partners, and citizens of our countries should request such guarantees from their respective governments, because without those guarantees, no agreement will be standing. This agreement will be fragile and will only last till Russia recuperates its forces and tries to attack again. So terms and conditions of such agreement will depend on the sanction pressure on the Russia. So we call on you to step up those sanctions, to enhance that pressure. The international businesses should not be thinking of circumventing those sanctions for capitalizing on the war. You should not be complicit in war crimes or in crimes against humanity. So we call on foreign governments to introduce a very strict responsibility for collaborationism up to the criminal culpability. And President Zelensky said before, do not sponsor Russia's war machine. Not a single euro to the occupiers. Close down all of your ports for them. Do not supply them with your goods and merchandise. Refuse to buy Russian power supplies. Do bring pressure to bear on Russia for Russia to leave Ukraine, to withdraw its forces from Ukraine. I know that peace is possible, but you should act to make it possible. Some governments are hesitant, but people of various countries have made their choice. And they are sure that Ukraine should be the member of the EU. On the average, 71% of respondents believe in that. 79% of Europeans believe that sanctions of Ukraine are a right thing to do. 67% of the EU member state citizens believe that Ukraine should be provided with effective weapons, according to the French Institute of Public Opinion, IFOP. These figures speak for themselves. So I will tell you this. Do listen to your electorate, to your voters. And we are calling on the international community, not only to the United West, but also to China and India, to forget about your past divides. You are the leaders of the world. Somebody would speak about two poles. I'm speaking about two parts of one whole. Russia should not stand in the way to an agreement amongst you. This mutual penetration amongst economies of the world and integration is much more powerful than the threat of mutual annihilation. You can find this understanding. And indeed, you might think that cooperation with Russia might protect you and the war might be localized within Ukraine. That's not so. Without putting up fierce resistance to Moscow, Moscow would not stop. And each of its next adventurism and escapade will bring the world closer to a hot global conflict. Dramatic events in Ukraine, our heroic fight for our country, for our freedom and democracy have demonstrated to the entire world that East and West should be together. So we are calling on the entire world to become part of Ukraine, to be consonant with Ukraine, be united. Glory to Ukraine.
I think you've made a very strong case for why it is Ukraine that must come victorious out of this war. Or if I rephrase what Prime Minister Boris Johnson was saying here, why Putin must fail. And I think this is a strategic objective that informed a lot of military assistance to Ukraine, but also Western sanctions. It is clear that you are seeing that more has to be done, and you made your case very powerful today. So I would like to move straight on to several questions that were popping up in the Q&A function of the webinar. And if there are any questions, please put them there. There are plenty of them, so I'll try to group them. You finished on this appeal for the East and the West of the world to be together against Putinism and evil, a kind of ideology that nobody is secure if in a way Putin gets an upper hand. So if you don't mind, I would like to go to China, right? Quite an important player on the global scene. there's a question whether you see any indication of China providing assistance to Russia from what you know, or whether you think China will remain neutral. How would you like to describe at this point the role of China?
First of all, China is the largest trade partner of Ukraine. And China is a most influential player in the global arena. As matters stand now, and I receive lots of information, and there is a lot of rumors about Russia's wanting China to support it militarily, economically, diplomatically, in different ways. But so far, we've seen China's neutral position. And as I said before, we believe that China, as one of the most potent global leaders, should play a more noticeable role in bringing this war to the end and in building up a new global security system. And as President Zelensky repeatedly said, we expect a dialogue between President Zelensky and President Xi to take place very soon. And we also expect China to contribute meaningfully to this new system of security for Ukraine. And we also expect China to be one of the guarantors within the framework of this security system, because we treat China with utmost respect, and we expect it to play a proactive role there.
Set of questions that is about international law and existing institutions that are, to some extent are powerless to prevent this illegal war in Ukraine. And there's a set of questions that on one hand goes to such institutions as the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, Special Tribunal. How do you see this playing out in the prosecution of the war crimes that Russia is now accused of in Ukraine? And do you think there could be a renunciation of Russia's status as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, or some kind of a reform of that council?
My answer would be very simple. Every person might face a situation in his or her life when they should use the emergency services, right? It might be 911 in the USA. It could be 112 in the EU member states. It's 101 in Ukraine. But at the global arena, this emergency service is non-existent. And we do need such service to be in place. The world will change dramatically after this war. So all of the institutions that you've mentioned and some that you haven't mentioned will have to transform as well. If some of them find their proper place and prove that they are truly effective, then they will survive and operate effectively. And now time is running out, we understand. Those that prove incapable of finding a true, effective, reliable response to the situation, they would perish, I think, because their existence would not be justified. As far as the international judicial institutions are concerned, the Ukrainian authorities have cooperated with them all of this time. Being the chief of staff or the head of the presidential office, I have been in my office from day one of this war. And we have stayed here all the time, 24/7, having not a minute of rest. So we continue to cooperate with all of our international partners. Our legal advisors are working day and night around the clock, and they are building the cases that Ukraine is going to file to international courts. You might know that one of such cases have already been heard by ICJ, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. We also had a special declaration that was launched at Chatham House with former Prime Minister Gordon Brown and Philip Sands, motioning establishment of a special tribunal for aggression against peace in Ukraine. So I don't know if you have any updates on setting up of that tribunal and if Ukraine is taking some lead on it with other countries. Foreign Minister Kuleba was at this event. If there's any new information, please let us know. If not, we'll be following what is happening with that special tribunal. Do you have any updates on that?
Ви знаєте, я не чув про цю ініціативу.
I haven't heard about this initiative so far, but I am fully in for it. You know, a lot has been said of late about the end of the world, about apocalypse of some sort. And if you are in Ukraine and you observe what's going on, it reminds you of this apocalyptic scenario, because this barbarity with which Russian occupiers behave in our territory vis-a-vis civilian population is astonishing. Yesterday, in some of the temporarily occupied cities and towns like Berdyansk, Kherson, people took to the streets to show that they want to live in Ukraine, and Russian military started firing at them. Some people were wounded. And yesterday, a Holocaust survivor who was 94 years old was killed in an airstrike against Kharkiv, peaceful city. You might have seen a video footage of the Jewish family finding refuge in a bomb shelter, and an elderly woman standing at the backdrop against the backdrop of Ukrainian and Israeli flag said that she survived in Babin Yar 80 years ago, and again she found herself in a bomb shelter after that. So we know that there will be no apocalypse, there will be no end of the world. People of Ukraine will save the world. And I'm sure that the politicians who respond timely and effectively to this plight of the Ukrainian people will assist us, because all peoples of the world want this war to stop, want Russian troops to be withdrawn from Ukraine, and for our people to stop being killed and our cities to stop being destroyed.
This high public support of Ukraine globally, and we see it not only in public opinion polling, but we also see this amazing expression of solidarity where a lot of people want to help Ukraine. They are asking, how can I help? And those who are not helping actually feel a certain guilt for an inaction. And there is a real global mobilization of a Ukrainian diaspora and Ukrainians around the world to galvanize and mobilize that public sentiment. But there are a couple of questions, and you also pointed in your presentation about the no-fly zone and the urgent need for air defense for Ukraine. So I want to ask you to develop a little bit, because you said if it's a no-fly zone is not an option, then, for example, Nicholas McLean is saying, could a safe haven be declared and enforced over Lviv and over certain humanitarian corridors, either by the UN, in spite of the Russian P5 veto, or by NATO, or by a coalition of the willing? Is the option like that is being discussed and put on the table for Ukraine's Western partners? Yes or no, and what do you hear? Or if this is about strengthening Ukraine's air defenses, and yesterday there was a declaration, I believe, of over 10 nations who said it's important to strengthen Ukraine air defenses. What does that actually entail to strengthen Ukraine's air defenses? So over to you.
Я хочу уточнити.
May I ask you to specify what you mean? Actually, I can tell you about the Berdyansk shooting of peaceful, unarmed protesters. It was 2 days ago, and in Kherson, it occurred yesterday. Right, now, speaking about your question, it is going on. Every day, President Zelensky would talk to at least 10 foreign leaders, our foreign minister, our prime minister. I myself also talk to security advisors of heads of various states, and we keep reiterating it as a mantra. Enforce the no-fly zone or enhance our air defense system. It seems to be a tough issue, but we are nearing every day to the solution every minute, I would say. But at the same time, every minute of postponing this solution creates yet additional destruction and death. So the world and Europe should give up this panic and fear in the face of Russia. Ukrainians have proven that when you give up fear, when you defend your land, everything is possible. We've never offended anyone. We've never act aggressively towards anyone. And now the aggressor has come to our land, and they behave as aggressors. They behave as invaders. They kill peaceful Ukrainians. They loot their properties. They rape women and men en masse. And that is yet another proof that solutions should be found immediately, because some might suspect that somebody will be benefiting from this war, and some might want this war to continue indefinitely for as many Ukrainians as possible to be killed. But I'm sure it is not true, and I'm sure that our partners globally are all interested in putting an end to this war, for all of us to overcome, for all of us to eventually set up a system of security and safety that will accommodate all of the nations of the world, Ukraine, Western countries, and Russia. And I understand that today, it would be next to impossible to persuade Ukrainians that Russia can be part of this security system, because they see Russian soldiers killing Ukrainian civilians every day. And it is a tragedy. It is a tragedy that we see this hostility between two nations, and that can stay with us for decades to come. And it is a tragedy. It is a tragedy for the Ukrainian people, and it is also a tragedy for the Russian people, not only for the leadership of Russia. But this tragedy can be stopped. Killings could be stopped, because everyone has come to realize that Ukrainians would not give up. Ukrainians would not surrender. We would not yield our land. You cannot speak with ultimatums with us. If you want to speak with us, speak to us as equal partners, with respect. Not with respect to a person, but to the country at large, to our independence, to our sovereignty, to our territorial integrity. And I think we have managed to prove it to the world that we are worthy of that respect. And never again will Ukraine be trying to open the doors that are closed to it. We are worthy of being part of this global security framework. A couple of years ago, when we were saying that Ukraine should be a regional leader, some politicians, including in Ukraine, would look at us with a lot of skepticism. And when I said that Zelensky could be one of the most prominent European leaders, people were most distrustful. They actually thought it was ridiculous. They ridiculed me openly. But nobody can doubt anymore that Zelensky is a global leader. Maybe there would be such people in Russia or elsewhere, but I'm sure not in the free civilized world. So I would like to encourage you all to feel responsible for Ukraine, because those pictures and images of killed children, of fallen soldiers, require that Ukraine should be at the top of the global agenda, not only now, but for a long time to come. That's our demand, not even our request.
Zelensky and the heroic action of Ukrainian people were portrayed as such in all media, and there is a huge solidarity of that, and the kind of equality of resistance and resilience that you spoke about has proven something very important to the world, that of course Russian military is not so invincible, and despite being rearmed and the second army in the world, Ukraine is able to actually hold its position and completely undermine the initial plan of Putin. So I wanted to ask you whether, with this military situation right now, whether do you see Russia position shifting? Do they take these losses and failures of the first months of the war and adapt their demands for Ukraine, negotiations to Ukraine? And maybe to finish our conversation today, if you could speak about where do you see peace is coming? Do you think it will be a negotiated settlement, or it will continue being canon speaking and really the outcome on the battlefield? How do you see this moving forward?
Ну, по-перше, я хотів би сказати, що
I would like to say that the whole world has seen the bravery, the resilience, and the valiance of our military. Our Commander-in-Chief, General Zaluzhny, is a most worthy man, a great son of Ukraine. But at the same time, I would like to ask you to keep a minute of silence to pay homage to those who gave their lives for Ukraine.
Дуже дякую всім.
Thank you very much.
І також я хочу сказати, що
And I would
сьогодні,
also
безумовно, ситуація дуже важка.
like to be frank with you. The situation is very difficult. It is dire because Russians will have 10 tanks where we have only one. But in many wars, it is the spirit of the military, invincible spirit of the military that prevails over the outnumbering enemy. And it is extremely important for us to pay homage to heroes who are still alive. And it is our duty today to make sure that as many of them survive, as many civilians as possible survive. So we want this war to come to an end as soon as possible, with an agreement on Ukrainian terms in the interest of the Ukrainian nation, with us gaining, not losing, with our getting a new security system in place. We don't have any time to waste. It's not the time to for navel gazing. A lot of our partners have already agreed to play this role of guarantors of this new security system or framework. Of course, this system is yet in the making, and we have still to negotiate the basics of it. But today we understand who are our true friends and who stand by and with Ukraine. The situation on the ground, as I said, is very difficult, but controlled, and attempts by the enemy to continue the siege of Mariupol that is akin to the siege of Leningrad in the Second World War. So it is horrendous because no one could have imagined that it can be happening in the 21st century. Certain tactical clashes are taking place, but our military are extremely motivated to stand their ground. And you should know that some of them are very well experienced. On the other hand, the Russian military include the conscripts of 18, 19 years of age. And Russia refuses to take the dead bodies of their soldiers back to Russia, back home. So this war is totally inhuman. So we believe that it should be stopped as soon as possible. And we see a lot of manipulation, unfortunately, both inside the country and beyond. So people keep exchanging rumors about certain compromises that Ukraine is prepared to agree to or to succumb to. But I can assure you that we are here and we stand our ground. The president, you might know, received several offers to leave Ukraine and to go to exile, but he has stayed. He is working in Kiev, and I believe we've got the best president that we could have in these hard times. And it is his very clear position that there can be no compromises regarding our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, our independence. We are prepared to negotiate the peace agreement. We are prepared to meet personally, and we are prepared to talk about Crimea, about Donbas. But first of all, we should focus on bringing this war to an end and withdrawal of the Russian troops and equipment from Ukrainian territory. And it should be a negotiation between the president of Ukraine and the president of Russia. And our delegation is working round the clock to arrange this meeting. Our delegation is assisted by experts from various countries, our partners, and we are working towards achieving certain agreement, which is the shortest and most effective way of ending the war. But we should always remember about our people who are in the harm's way. And they keep saying that we will never leave our land, we will stay here and we'll stand our ground. So all of us together, politicians, diplomats, economic community, inside the country and abroad, our international partners should be working together, because every day, every minute is about somebody's life. Ukraine knows no sleep now.
You took a lot of difficult questions and spent some good time with us. And maybe before we wrap up, it's a kind of a question on the possible scenarios. And David Manning is asking, and there were a couple of questions related to that. How great is the risk that Putin will escalate and use weapons of mass destructions? And people were asking both about tactical, nuclear, chemical, phosphor bombs and other things. Do you think the Russians will soon try to take Odessa from the sea and launch a new land invasion from Belarus? So whatever you can tell us with this military realm, and how do you assess these risks? And then we'll wrap it up.
Кажу вам так. Ми останніми місяці чули.
Over the last few months, we've heard from our partners and our intelligence community about the invasion plan. And we saw more than 100,000 troops amassed on our border. But we never thought they would be able to make this mad decision. Of course, all of those risks that you've mentioned are very tangible. I don't think that Putin would be ready to use nuclear weapons, because it will result in the extermination of life on our planet. And even if he doesn't care about Ukrainian children, he does care about his own children, or at least he should. As far as other types of weapons are concerned, under the circumstances, we should be ready and we should brace up for any scenarios. I hope, though, that our negotiations will be ongoing and that our delegations would manage to achieve some sort of an agreement that will meet Ukrainian interests. And I hope that we will eventually be able to arrange a meeting between the two presidents. And I also hope that the agreement will provide for the ceasefire, for the withdrawal of and pull out of the Russian hardware and troops to the borders as of the 23rd of February 2022, and that these agreements will give rise to the negotiation about the restoring our territorial integrity within the internationally recognized borders. And most importantly, and I apologize for repeating it several times in a row, is that this should be an agreement about a new security framework for Ukraine. In no way can it be anything like the Budapest Memorandum, because we have paid an extremely high price for our past mistakes, for trusting those who were not trustworthy, for hoping for something that should not be hoped for. So now we would insist on very clear, binding, and guaranteed by influential countries that this agreement should be acceptable to us. And I believe that this approach is in the interest of Ukraine as well as of the entire civilized world. And I believe that it is quite realistic to achieve such an agreement. And the entire future of the world hinges on this agreement. Ukraine has done everything that is humanly possible or even impossible to contribute to the international security. And our military, our people would not allow anyone to hesitate between the good and evil. And peoples of the world, by going out into their squares and streets, demonstrating their for Ukraine, have also demonstrated that they are on our side. Ukraine will prevail, Ukrainians will overcome, and we will reconstruct our country. Unfortunately, we will never get back the people who have been killed, but we will do everything for their families and their loved ones to find a solace. And we are now thinking about how to build a more beautiful, happier, and more successful country.
Even try to summarize because I think you've said it all at the very end, and we clearly see populations around the world asking their policymakers, what have they done for Ukraine? What have they done for peace and security in Europe? And nobody can really sit for too long on the fence. It will take time until that pressure actually translates in some places. I'm not saying in all places, but in some places for that real global coalition. And I think you are leading the way with President Zelensky. You have almost unequivocal public support from the Ukrainian nation. Strikingly, 76% of Ukrainians, even at times of war, believe it's going in the right directions. 80% believe in the victory, and it's your leadership and it's bravery of Ukrainian armed forces, but also that assistance of collective West you were talking about. So keep defenses, protect Ukraine, and we will engage with you and your team on these complicated issues of security, and we are happy to also provide some of our ideas. I think that is a key question for not just Ukraine's security, but for global security architecture. We will stay in touch. Take care of yourself, your team, Ukraine, your family. As now people say, how's your family? 44 million is my family. So you stay strong, and we're sending our best regards to you and to all Ukrainians. Thank you so much, Andriy, for your time. До побачення.
Дуже дякую. Дуже дякую. Ми переможемо.